I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years, long enough to see 2 HOA presidents come and go, and longer still to know when someone steps into power wearing a crown they didn't earn. Her name was Linda Hartwell, but around here, we started calling her Madam President not out of respect, but out of disbelief at how far she'd go to feel important. She took over the HOA board 6 months ago after the last president, a kind older gentleman named Rick, stepped down for health reasons. Rick had his flaws, but at least he understood that neighbors were neighbors, not subjects. Linda, on the other hand, made it her mission to remind everyone that she was elected by majority, even though only 12 people voted, and most didn't even realize the meeting was happening. Within her first week, she'd already put out a new community bulletin formatted like a government memo about enforcing mailbox uniformity, leaf pickup deadlines, and improper holiday lighting extensions. I wish I were exaggerating. At first we laughed. My wife and I joked that she probably had a gavel at home and practiced speeches in front of the mirror. But then came the violations. I received my first one 2 weeks later for extended driveway clutter. What was the clutter? A folded-up basketball hoop my teenage son had been using after school. It had been there for less than 48 hours. No warning, just a notice taped to our front door and an email marked final notification. When I emailed the HOA board, which, of course, only meant emailing Linda, I got a curt reply. All homeowners are expected to adhere to regulations. Exceptions are not a precedent. Whatever that meant. Still, I complied. I stored the hoop in the garage and thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, our neighbor, Phil, a quiet guy in his 60s, who'd just installed a small porch swing for his wife, got a violation too. Unapproved architectural addition. The notice read, mind you, the swing didn't even touch the ground. It was a hanging bench, bolted under his overhang. But Linda was on a roll. And then came the real problem. One morning, while walking back from the mailbox with my coffee, I noticed bright orange spray paint across the edge of my front yard. 2 neat lines running parallel down the grass, just 3 feet from my driveway. Confused, I walked over, man, that's set, and that S when I saw the white flag staked into the lawn. Under review, HOA land. I almost laughed. My house sits on a double-lot corner, something that made it slightly more expensive when we bought it. I own that strip of grass. It's on the deed. It's part of the property we pay taxes on, but apparently Linda believed that corner was community property, because of a clause she found in a 1998 HOA Landscaping Amendment 1 that had been enforced for over 2 decades. She was claiming a sliver of my land to plant a beautification garden, without so much as a conversation. That's when the switch flipped for me. I wasn't going to take this lying down. What Linda didn't know and what no one around here really talked about was what I actually did for a living. I'd kept it quiet because I liked being low-key, but when it comes to power trips, especially ones that mess with my land and my family's peace, let's just say I don't play around, and Linda was about to find that out the hard way. The next morning, my wife and I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery outside our window. At first I thought it was a city crew doing utility work. But when I stepped outside in my slippers, coffee half full in my hand, I saw it. A landscaping company truck, not city. Private, had backed a small skid steer loader into my side lawn. One of the workers was unloading pallets. Another was marking more lines on my grass, and standing right next to them, in a bright lemon blazer and clipboard in hand, arms crossed like she owned the block, was none other than Linda Hartwell. She turned and gave me this smug, bureaucratic smile. Morning. We're just staging materials for the community garden, she said, like she was giving me the weather report. I blinked. On my property. She lifted her clipboard. According to HOA article Linda, I said, doing my best not to lose it, this entire strip was part of my closing documents. It's taxable land. I own it. She shrugged. We had our legal chair review it. If you want to contest, you can file a petition with the board. Until then, we're proceeding as scheduled. That's when I took a closer look at her clipboard. No permits, no city coordination, just an HOA project form with her signature on every line. I took a breath and walked back inside. Not because I was giving up, but because I needed to handle this the right way. The permanent way. See, what Linda didn't know and what I'd never flaunted around the neighborhood was that I spent 17 years working in municipal code enforcement, another 8 years in state-level regulatory affairs, and currently, I was on assignment with a multi-jurisdictional task force on property rights violations. Put simply, I've written the rules Linda was trying to twist. So I made a few calls. First was to the city planning office, then the zoning board. Then I contacted my friend Donnie, who used to run the very landscaping company Linda had contracted. Turns out she found a fly-by-night group with no license to dig, no insurance for residential landscaping, and certainly no permits to break ground on private property. By 2 p.m. I had everything I needed: satellite plats showing the property lines, my deed with a meat-sand bounds survey, and an email from the city zoning inspector confirming that no communal garden was ever submitted for permit review. That evening I walked back out and found the crew halfway into trenching my lawn. They'd already cut up my irrigation line and stacked 2 pallets of pavers in front of my mailbox. "Gentlemen," I said calmly, "you're trespassing on private land. This is your notice to stop work immediately." The guy operating the skid steer looked at Linda, then back at me. "Ma'am says it's HOA land." I held up the plat map and the signed affidavit from zoning. "This says otherwise. If you keep digging, you'll be personally liable for property damage. I suggest you pack it up." The man didn't even hesitate. He dropped the controls and climbed down. Linda, however, was fuming. "You're interfering with a board-sanctioned project," she barked. "You'll be fined for obstruction. You're about to be served with a cease and desist," I replied. And I meant it. That night, while she was still busy sending violation emails and probably preparing her HOA speech for the next meeting, I filed a formal property encroachment complaint with the county assessor. I included photographs, video of the equipment on my lawn, and documentation showing the lack of permitting. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to the State Attorney General's office, specifically the Civil Enforcement Division that oversees misuse of HOA power, and I wrote a complaint using legal language so sharp, I practically felt bad for whoever was going to read it. Almost within 48 hours, I had a response. The AG's office had flagged the HOA for a compliance audit. The city zoning office issued a stop work order, which I posted proudly on a stake at the edge of my lawn. And best of all, the landscaping company received a $7,000 fine for unpermitted work, payable by the contracting party. That meant Linda. You'd think that would be enough to stop her. But people like Linda don't let go of power easily. No, she doubled down. She started going door to door, riling up neighbors, handing out voting flyers to oust me from the community Facebook group, which I didn't even use. But what she didn't know was that her house of cards was about to collapse, because the compliance audit, it wasn't just paperwork, it was the start of a full-blown investigation. By the time Friday rolled around, it was no longer just about Linda and her clipboard, it was bigger, way bigger. See, when the state compliance audit officially began, I got a call from an investigator out of the capital. He wanted to confirm a few details about the project, and here's where it gets interesting. Linda hadn't held any such vote. In fact, when I asked several neighbors, not one of them even knew about the community garden until they saw the digging on my lawn. So I went digging myself. I started with the HOA's annual financial reports. These are supposed to be distributed every January. But in the 2 years we'd lived there, I realized we'd only received one flimsy pamphlet, no breakdowns, no itemized expenses, just a pie chart and a page full of vague bullet points. With some effort, I got access to the last 5 years of reports. Turns out Linda had quietly shifted over $12,000 from community beautification into board initiative funds, a category that doesn't even exist under state HOA compliance law. That's when I knew this wasn't just pamphlet tripping, this was fraud. I packaged my findings and sent them to the investigator. He thanked me and told me to keep any HOA communications I received from that point forward. Something was clearly rotten. Now remember, all of this was happening while Linda was still trying to wage war publicly. One morning, I woke up to find a citation zip-tied to my front doorknob. In bold red letters, it read, "Improper refusal to cooperate with HOA project. Fine $1,000. Due in 7 days." She signed it personally. I knew it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, but I saved it and took a picture for evidence. Then I noticed something even more ridiculous. Linda had placed orange spray-painted stakes 5 feet into my backyard. She had apparently decided the HOA line didn't just run through the side of my house, but also the back. I wasn't the only one getting targeted either. To neighbors Jim across the street and Maria on the corner both told me they'd been hit with violations too. Jim's was for non-compliant mailbox styling, and Maria's was for failure to prune her hydrangeas. Turns out Linda was now retaliating against anyone who voiced support for me in the Facebook group. She was spiraling. And then karma knocked. One Monday afternoon, a white state SUV with an official seal parked in front of Linda's house. A man in a navy windbreaker stepped out and knocked on her door. I watched from my kitchen window as she opened it, clipboard in hand as usual, probably assuming it was another contractor or city rep. But her face changed the moment he showed his badge. Turns out she wasn't just under review. She was under official state investigation for unauthorized financial reallocation, retaliatory enforcement behavior, abuse of HOA authority without proper quorum, potential misappropriation of HOA dues, and the kicker. The audit uncovered $4,300 in payments to a landscaping company that didn't exist. The contractor she hired had no business license, no nothing. It was traced back to a PayPal account linked to her cousin out of state. Yep, she had funneled HOA money to family under the table. The board started fracturing. Linda had operated like a queen for years, and the rest of the board had followed her blindly until now. The treasurer resigned. 2 other members sent out an open email stating they had no prior knowledge of the financial decisions Linda made. Suddenly, the queen had no court, but Linda didn't go down quietly. She held a special emergency board meeting in her front yard. I'm serious. She set up a folding table, brought out a speaker system, and tried to rally the neighborhood into supporting her. She passed out handouts claiming the state investigation was a witch hunt, and that I had weaponized government against the community. Only 5 people showed up, and 3 of them left halfway through when she started shouting about how HOA rules were more powerful than city code. It was getting sad and dangerous. Because the more the pressure built, the more unpredictable Linda became. One night, around 9:30 p.m., I caught her in my yard with a flashlight, pointing at my retaining wall and jotting something down in her little violation notebook. I stepped outside, and she nearly dropped her pen. "What are you doing?" I asked calmly. "Just checking the gradient on this structure. It may violate slope restrictions," she stammered. In the dark, she didn't answer, just stormed off. The next morning, I called the investigator and gave him everything: photos, timestamps, even security camera footage. That sealed it. Linda's time was running out, and in the next chapter she'd face a consequence she never expected, not just legal, but humiliating. The moment Linda received her official cease and desist order from the state was the exact moment her control over our neighborhood began to unravel. I didn't have to witness it firsthand to feel it. Word spread fast. The sealed letter had been hand-delivered by a compliance officer and posted with an orange violation sticker right on her front door for all to see. The next morning, someone in our community Facebook group posted a photo of it with the caption, "Looks like someone finally got a taste of her own violation notices." The post got more reactions in 24 hours than any HOA announcement had in the past year, and just like that, the tides began to turn. People who had been silent before, too scared to challenge her, suddenly started speaking up. Jim, the guy across the street, came forward with screenshots of texts Linda had sent him threatening legal action over his lawn chairs. Maria from the corner uploaded photos of her hydrangeas with a sarcastic, "Breaking news. The criminals have flowers." But the real turning point, that came when I decided to take it one step further. I contacted a local investigative reporter who had done stories before on HOA overreach. Her name was Tamra, and she was sharp enough to immediately understand the potential impact of a story like this. She asked for evidence, and I gave her everything: financial documents, video footage, violation letters, testimony from neighbors, and the audit summary from the state. Within 3 days, the headline hit their site: "Local HOA president under investigation for fraud and harassment." They even included the security footage of Linda trespassing into my yard with a flashlight, like some rogue inspector in pajamas. That's when all hell broke loose. News trucks showed up. One of them parked right outside Linda's house for an interview, but she refused to answer the door. Another neighbor said she could hear Linda yelling on the phone behind closed blinds, pacing furiously in what she called her HOA war room. But this wasn't a war she could win. Her credibility was crumbling, and she was losing allies by the hour. By Friday, 2 more board members had publicly resigned via an email blast sent to the entire neighborhood. One even apologized personally for allowing things to get this far. It was more than just damage control. It was abandonment. No one wanted to go down with her that night. Something truly symbolic happened. The HOA community garden signs that had been staked into my lawn were quietly removed. No announcement, no apology. Just gone, vanished overnight like they'd never existed. My yard, once the battleground for Linda's empire, was finally free of her mark, but it didn't end there. The special audit findings were officially submitted to the state HOA authority, and they didn't hold back. They recommended immediate removal of Linda as HOA president, prohibition from serving on any HOA board for 5 years, mandatory reimbursement of misappropriated funds, referral to the county DA for possible criminal charges, and yes, the DA picked it up. That's when Linda, for the first time in this whole ordeal, went silent. No emails, no clipboard strolls, no Facebook posts. She vanished from every platform and locked her front gate with a rusty chain like that would somehow stop the consequences from entering. But consequences don't knock, they kicked the door in. A week later, the neighborhood held an emergency vote. With over 80% participation, Linda was officially removed from the HOA board. A new interim president was selected, Jim, the same guy she tried to bully about his lawn furniture. Karma delivered cold. And then came the final public moment of poetic justice. At the next community meeting, which was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it, Jim read aloud a letter from Linda's attorney claiming she would be stepping down and moving out within the month. Apparently, she was no longer comfortable living in a hostile neighborhood environment. That's Richie created the hostility. She sparked every fire, and now she couldn't handle the smoke. People clapped, not in celebration, but in relief. You could feel the weight lift off the entire block, but I wasn't done yet. I stood up at the end of the meeting and asked for one more thing, motion to rescind all fines and violations issued by the former HOA president that are currently under appeal or investigation. The room erupted in unanimous aye votes, all of it wiped clean. My $1,000 fine, gone. Jim's mailbox warning, gone. Maria's hydrangea citation, gone. For once, justice wasn't just served, it was delivered on a silver platter. Linda's power trip had not only backfired and imploded, and just when you thought it was over, the final twist came days later. The local newspaper reported that Linda was under investigation for potential tax fraud. That unlicensed contractor she paid was also writing off the payments as charity donations from the HOA. You can't make this stuff up. She thought she was above the rules, that she could twist laws, silence voices, and bulldoze through people's rights, all in the name of neighborhood standards. Instead, she ended up losing everything she built on lies. Her clipboard was now just a piece of plastic, her house, for sale by owner, her reputation, toast. But for the rest of us, we got our neighborhood back, and I hadn't even pulled the final move yet. After Linda's resignation, the community felt like a town waking up from a long, exhausting nightmare. Neighbors who had been avoiding each other out of paranoia were suddenly organizing block parties again. Driveways had chalk art, Christmas lights popped up in July. Dogs were off leashes more than they should be, but no one cared. The air just felt lighter. Still, for me, it wasn't done. Because while the community got its peace back, I hadn't forgotten how much of my time, money, and energy Linda had cost me. Sure, the fines were erased. But what about the public defamation? The illegal citations? The emotional toll? Linda had used the HOA like a personal vendetta tool, and her exit, while humiliating, still didn't fix the damage she left in her wake. So I went one step further. I filed a civil suit, not out of revenge, but principle. I had collected everything, every video, every voice recording of her threatening neighbors, the contractor quotes she forced on me, the emails where she lied about permits, harassed my tenants, and threatened to condemn parts of my home. Turns out, when you weaponize an HOA for personal vendettas, and you're reckless enough to leave a paper trail, you don't just lose your power, you lose your legal footing. My attorney said I had a solid case for harassment, trespassing, and even property damage due to her unauthorized HOA landscaping adjustments, which, in plain English, meant she ripped up my native plants and replaced them with gravel against my will. The lawsuit made headlines again, and once again, the media was more than happy to report that former HOA president sued by homeowner over alleged abuse of power. When she was finally served, she tried to fight back, claimed it was retaliation and unfair persecution, but the community didn't buy it. Half the people she had wronged offered to testify free of charge. 3 former board members provided written statements. The local contractor even admitted Linda tried to pay him cash off the record to dig up my yard without a permit. By the time we got to mediation, Linda was a shell of the woman who once barked orders on next door like she was commanding a private army. She settled. Out of court, she agreed to pay damages, issue a written apology, and officially relinquish any HOA voting rights even if she ever moved back. But the real cherry on top. 3 weeks later, I found out who had bought Linda's house. It wasn't a stranger. It was me. Through a proxy investment group I'd been part of for years, we de-scooped it up for well below market after she quietly listed it under a fake LLC. thinking no one would notice. I walked into the open house in plain clothes. The agent had no idea. I didn't even flinch when I signed the closing docs. I now owned the same home where Linda held HOA meetings, the one with her private president parking only sign out front, her kingdom, gone. I turned her old office into a library, took down every sign, every framed newsletter, every rule poster she had taped on the walls, and on the front porch, where she used to stand, with her arms crossed and clipboard in hand, I hung a small wooden sign that simply read, "Welcome to the neighborhood. We mind our own business here." When I posted a photo of that porch in the community group, it went viral overnight. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. One from Maria said, "That porch looks better than it ever did under Linda's rule." Another read, "It's poetic justice that she built a dictatorship and it turned into a library." But the best one, Jim, the new HOA president, simply commented, "Next time we vote, I'm nominating you." I didn't take the offer. I told Jim I was done with boards, elections, and committee meetings. But I promised to show up when it mattered, because now, finally, our neighborhood had balance again. No more power trips, no more fake fines, no more secret meetings, just people living their lives, respectfully, together. Funny how someone can spend years building control through fear, only to lose it all in a single act of arrogance. Linda thought she was invincible. She thought her power came from her clipboard, her title, her so-called rules. But in the end, it was all an illusion. And all it took was one neighbor, one voice, and one move, to bring the whole tower crashing down.